Hello, everybody. My name is Becky Draper, and I am an Ayurveda health coach and Vedic astrologer. And I help people align with the rhythms and cycles in nature. And today we are going to talk about aligning with the Mercury retrograde that started on June 29th. So I'm actually a couple days late on this. But either way, it started June 29th and it will go until July 23rd. So let's talk a little bit first about what a Mercury retrograde is and how we can actually align with this energy. So oftentimes when we hear Mercury retrograde, we think like, oh, this is a bad thing. And it's actually like overplayed now in our culture where it's almost kind of like a cliche. So I almost hesitate sometimes to make a Mercury retrograde video just because I feel like now it's like almost a meme or whatever. So we're still going to talk about it, but instead of looking at it from this perspective that's kind of superficial and that we've all been trained to see it as like a bad thing, we can instead kind of look at what the energetics of a Mercury retrograde are and how we can actually use that energy to benefit us. So, whenever a planet is retrograding, it's appears in the sky as if it's like moving backwards, but planets don't actually move backwards. So that's actually just an illusion that the planet's moving backwards, but it's actually because that's when that planet, whatever planet it is, and Earth are going to be the closest that they'll ever be at in the sky. And so it creates the illusion that the planet is moving backwards as we like move past that planet. And you could almost look at it's the illusion of when you are in a parking spot and someone's backing out, but it makes you feel like you're moving backwards or forwards, or there's that illusion that you're moving because another car like is moving in a parking spot by you. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I don't know how to even explain that very well, but I'm sure you've all had that moment. And that's what it is. It's an illusion. Nothing's moving backwards, but it is when the planet is the closest to us. And so a lot of other, or if you look at Western astrology, they say, well, when the planet is retrograding, that's when it has the least amount of power. And that's the problem because we're not getting the Mercury energy. But in Vedic astrology, that the belief is actually twisted and it's the other way around, and they believe that the planet has the most energy because it's the closest to us, so we can actually feel the vibration more. So in my just like logically, I feel like that makes a lot more sense that when the planet would be that close to us, we would actually be feeling the energy of the planet a lot more. And this backwards motion in both of the astrologies is similar in the sense of like anything that starts with an RE is like you're revisiting, reevaluating, rewinding, um realizing like anything with an RE word ends up kind of falling into this space of the retrograde where you're going to revisit something from the past. And the reason that can be challenging is because a lot of the times we're just trying to move forward. And when we have to go back and revisit something, it can oftentimes be some type of disturbance. It can bring up things that we were trying to just kind of like pretend weren't there and move through. And we can actually, but instead of seeing this as a disturbance, we can actually see this as like an opportunity because we need to digest our life. And that means we need to digest all of the experiences that we have. Oh. Bless me. I don't know if I should start the video over, but I feel like I'm on a roll. So I'm going to keep trying to go, but we need to digest all of the experiences in our life. And we are like the sum of what we digest. And so this Mercury retrograde or any time a planet is retrograding, it's giving us an opportunity to kind of go back and revisit some of the things that we might have like skimmed over. And, when we're dealing with a Saturn retrograde, we're like going a lot deeper, we're spending a lot more time there, and we're dealing with like deeper karmic themes. And so we think of those things in a completely different way. But for Mercury, when we're talking about communication and um, we're talking about information, ideas, and facts, even. And so when these things get confused or um, when they get disrupted, then that actually can really cause a lot of like hassle in the material world. And so, really, Mercury retrograde is just kind of like a hassle. That's how it's kind of seen. But it gives us this opportunity to go back and digest some of the things that we didn't really digest during this last like Mercury round. And Mercury retrogrades 3 times in a year. So about every 4 months you're going to get a Mercury retrograde. So it's fairly often. That's another thing, is Mercury retrogrades more often than any of the other planets. That's another reason why we hear about it. And it's very consistent. It's very it has like a very consistent pattern. And the other planets can be very sporadic in the way that these things unfold. So Mercury is going to retrograde, or is in Cancer right now, retrograding back through Cancer. And when Mercury is in Cancer, this is when we might be like overly emotional about some of our ideas and some of the things that we think. And so this isn't always the best placement for Mercury, because we, instead of being more pragmatic and more stable and able to not get like too emotional about the things that we think, we start to get emotional and express it that way, which can cause people to feel offended or think that we're not listening to them, or it's just not really a good way of communicating when we're being overly emotional. And so um, we might be visiting some of the things that we have said to people where we were being overly emotional, and we might have to like make peace with some of those things. We might have to revisit the communication of those things, although I don't recommend communicating when Mercury's retrograding. So maybe it's time to more so reflect on how you want to visit those things, or even if they start to show up like real time, which is usually how those things unfold, then you can start to be aware of like, where am I being overly emotional in my ideas, and can I get away from this situation and get to a place where I'm not so emotional about it, and then try to communicate. So that's a big theme anytime Mercury is in Cancer. And as we're working backwards, then there's going to be things that are coming up present time and past time that are going to be where you have to take a step back, figure out where you're being like overly emotional in your communication, and how you can get to a place where you can be taking on like a lot less emotion and just be a little bit more centered in facts and communicating from a place of pragmatism. And then once Mercury gets into Gemini, which happens on July 6th, which is rather quickly. So this will be a nice change of pace, because once Mercury goes into Gemini, this is where Mercury shines. Mercury feels very creative and isn't feeling that emotional, actually is inspired and wants to learn and get new information and do some fun things. So if once Mercury goes in that place, if you have been like working on projects and you were really inspired by them, then this might be a time where you're going to go back in and come up with new ideas and revisit a lot of these projects and creative things that you were working on before Mercury went into Cancer, because there's a good chance that maybe for that moment you weren't feeling as inspired. And as soon as that Mercury in Gemini comes back into place, you might start to get that excitement up again. And then it also depends on like what house Mercury is at in your chart when Mercury's in Gemini. And you can find that out by knowing whatever your ascendant is and go by what your ascendant is in Vedic astrology, which is going to be different than Western astrology. And it will go by the true placements of the planets where they were actually at on the day you were born if you do Vedic astrology. And whatever that ascendant is, whatever sign that is in, marks the first house, your first house. So if your ascendant is in Gemini, then your first house would be Gemini, and this would be happening in your first house. And when you understand that, then you could be like, oh, okay, so if this is happening in the house of the self, I might feel really inspired to work on a new goal or a new habit, or even just like my appearance, or maybe some type of self-development. So that would be first house inspiration. So if you want to go deeper into this, you could always book a Vedic astrology reading, which there will be a link below that you can do that through. And then, or you could join my school community and follow along with these videos. And we're going to do a moon course soon too, so I'm going to talk more about in other videos. But anyway, so then as Mercury is moving back through Gemini, this probably won't be that disruptive of a Mercury retrograde because Mercury does really good in Gemini, and we'll actually be feeling like we're being productive. And a lot of the things that we'll be revisiting as we're moving backwards will just be giving us like more inspiration, and we're refining some of our old ideas. And so it might actually give people an opportunity to revisit and then get re-inspired. And so that's my recommendation of aligning with the Mercury retrograde, rather than sitting around and being fearful that you're going to double book a bunch of bands on your during your job, because every time Mercury retrogrades, it seems like that happens. Instead of being fearful about that, and of course, just try to do your due diligence to be more careful, and then always building habits to be more and more refined and careful. But in general, like, instead of focusing so much on all these bad things that Mercury retrograde brings, we can turn inward and focus on like the things that Mercury is asking us to revisit. And when Mercury is in Gemini, we're being asked to revisit our ideas, our inspirations, our projects, our creativity, what we're interested in, what's getting us excited. And so this is actually an opportunity to see those things from a new perspective. And that's how you can take Mercury retrograding energy and actually use it to your advantage, and see that this is an opportunity to kind of revisit something. And in this case, it's probably something that you're creating or something that you're highly interested in that's really got you inspired and excited. And if you want to know what house this is happening in, then you can always book a reading or look up your Vedic chart. And then when Mercury ends at the retrograde on July 23rd, he'll still be in Gemini. And so we get a lot of time with Mercury and Gemini here. And this is like a second visit, because we're revisiting Gemini, because Mercury was just in Gemini before Mercury went into Cancer and then retrograded. And that energy really is a great placement for Mercury. And when Mercury is in a good place, our communication is on. We feel like we want to like take action and do things. We feel like we want to learn. And so this is a great time to really take advantage of those opportunities, have the conversations that you need to have, work on the projects that you want to work on, and do the things that excite you and make you happy. And I'll see you in the next video.